I definitely got that advice because it was never natural to them on how the dots connected. But for me, I still believe that it's going to connect. I just have to find the thread that's connecting all of this, right? So I'm going to keep going until it connects. And I think now when I look back, I've been in the industry for 12 years, and everything connects for me.
I'm excited to be speaking with Vidya Srinivasan, product leader, speaker, D&I advocate, and singer. She's a principal product manager on the trust and safety team for Facebook, Messenger, and Instagram. A passionate advocate for diversity and inclusion in tech, she has served as the general chair of the Grace Hopper Conference, the world's largest gathering of women technologists. Vidya is a public speaker who has given 130 talks and counting on a broad range of product, technical, and career topics. She holds a degree in Indian classical music and performs regularly. Vidya has filed 21 patents and is also an avid fitness fanatic. Vidya, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessica.
I want to go back to actually a time when you were younger. So give us a glimpse of childhood Vidya. What seeds were planted that got you interested in technology, music, or even public speaking?
Yeah, childhood Vidya. I grew up in a very traditional South Indian household. My mother tongue is Tamil. I grew up in South India in the city called Hyderabad. Which is where Satya Nadella is from. So people are able to reference that better.
Yeah.
In our family, education and arts, I think, were very important. So I was not really given a choice of, do you want to learn music? It's more like, yeah, you're going to learn some form of art. Which honestly I'm grateful for, because I think if I'd been given a choice, I probably wouldn't have known enough to make the right choice. But I started learning music since, my age of 3. My mom taught me, she was the first teacher. And then eventually, I learned from a lot of other eminent professionals in the field of music. And education was always important. I mean, there was no question about that. There was no question about not getting good grades or not doing well at school. All my cousins did that way. So that was the way of life for me, right? But what I also learned from my parents are both bankers, and they're extremely hardworking. My dad always says, don't expect anything in free in life. Just like work for it, right? So you have to work for it. If you want this, you have to work for it. Like hard work is going to be your best buddy in life. So I think from a very young age, I kind of embraced that, right? Yeah, if I want this, I have to work really hard for it, right? So music and, education were all like hand in hand. Like that was all my school life was, honestly. And I also got into sports. That's the other value that I think my, parents kind of instilled in me is, if you want to try something, just go try it. Go try it. You're gonna, if you are good, there's gonna be a few things where you're good at. There's gonna be other things where you're not gonna be good at, but you'll never know that until you try it, right? So I gave my shot at, dance. Like I also learned Indian classical dance for exactly 2 years, I think. And then I was like, no, this is not for me. I'm going to stick with music, I think I was able to understand what gives me satisfaction. What is it that I love doing versus, one of the things that I naturally connect with, and it was music for me, right? So I tried Indian classical dance. And when I was in middle and high school, I was also a track and field athlete. So I was doing 100 meters, 200 meters, and a 400 meter relay. So I was training for that. So that was my childhood, like music and sports in, middle and high school. And then education was always important.
Yeah, I love this. Working hard, obviously. I could see, reaping the benefits of that, and also trying things. I mean, 2 years is actually pretty long to try something that wasn't quite a fit. So props to you for doing that. I'm curious that as a child, did you believe that you would be able to pursue a multi-passionate life and multiple areas? What was your belief about careers as a kid?
I the place where I grew up in, most women, um, they were working, but I think a lot more emphasis was on the family.
Mm.
Like my mom was working, she grew phenomenally well in her career, but family was always her first priority. Like she was always juggling family and work. So I think that became of second nature to me that, when I grow up, I probably am gonna, you know, uh, focus my energy and time and effort on raising my family, being there for my family, helping my family thrive. And then I also want to be successful in my career. Like those two dimensions became, pretty natural to me. But what was interesting was through the journey, the other dimensions, that I picked up and how they all just intertwined. Like, it was never obvious when I started. In fact, I was actually given advice by my then, directors, etc., at Microsoft, which is where I started working first, saying, "Hey, the amount of energy you're putting for that public speaking thing, if you put that at work, you probably will get promoted faster." You know, so I definitely got that advice because it was never natural to them on how the dots connected. But for me, I still believe that it's going to connect. I just have to find the thread that's connecting all of this, right? So I'm going to keep going until it connects. And I think now when I look back, and I've been in the industry for 12 years, and everything connects for me.
Yeah, tell me more. What are the connections that you see between these public speaking opportunities, your work, you have a big job, you're leading the election strategy at Meta, and you're also, you're a mom of two pretty young children. How does it all connect?
I started public speaking the year I graduated and joined Microsoft. And I took to public speaking only because I was having massive confidence issues. I never worked before. I, grew up in India, came here to do my, graduate studies, and directly my first job was at Microsoft. And I joined a team, and to no one's surprise, I was the only girl in the team, you know? So, I didn't have anybody who looked like me, Jessica, in the entire floor in that building. You know, I could count the number of women who were working in that entire org, and I couldn't understand the accent of some of the people who were in my team because all of this was new. To tell you how naive I was when I first met my then manager, he's such a great person. I called him Sir.
Oh.
Okay. Because I met him and he came to the lobby to kind of, introduce himself and take me into, Microsoft Building 16 back then. That's where I started first in the Redmond campus. And I called him Sir, and he looked at me and he was like, "You can just call me by my name." Because in India, people usually refer to their superiors by sir and madam. That was my mental model, right? So,
Right.
and I had massive confidence issues, and I was like, I have to figure it out. Like, how do I build confidence? I don't know. And then I literally, I'm not even making this stuff up. Like, went to Google. I'm like, how do you build confidence? And the first sponsored ad that came up was public speaking.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to be a public speaker now because, like the internet says that's a great way to build confidence. That's how it started. And the first ever talk that I gave was at the Grace Hopper conference in 2013. So that's kind of how, my journey started. Like for me, it was desperation to build confidence. And in my mind, I was, imagining that if I'm able to put myself in front of random strangers and give a talk and answer their questions, I should be able to do the same thing at work with my colleagues. That's how it started, right? But what started as a need to build confidence soon became something that I really started enjoying. I was surprised that there were people who wanted to hear me speak. I was surprised that people found meaning in what I was sharing. So, and then it became something that I absolutely started loving. And what I also figured, public speaking itself is a journey. There's so many things that you have to try and experiment to figure out what is your style of speaking? What are the topics you're comfortable speaking? Right. And where music really helped me was I was so used to being on stage from a very young age because I was singing.
Mm-hmm.
My mom put me, I think my mom put me on stage at my age 5 or 6 for my first performance. right? So I was so used to being on stage. I was so used to singing in front of people. So I had no concept of stage fright whatsoever. So the only thing that was different over here was instead of singing, I was speaking. And what, in fact, I started doing was I started music to kind of break the ice. So I always say my tagline is like, I mash up music and tech on stage because I used to go to the most technical talks and then I used to start it with an Adele song, because nobody expects that. And, in this world where, Asian world where people really struggle to focus, that was like a breath of fresh air for everybody. So I used to get on stage and I used to like randomly sing a song and everybody was like, wait, what? Like, what is she doing? And then that was the way I wish I used to connect with my audience. And then I also used to, promise them that if you stay till the end, ask me the good questions, I will close it with a song, So, but I started using music to calm my own nerves as well as, break the ice and bond with my audience.
I love this story. And it's such an amazing story of going to Google and Googling, how do I build confidence? And then getting in front of, you've given talks ranging from 10 people to 25,000 people. That's incredible. And I remember I saw you speak a couple years ago, and I was really inspired and impressed that you started out with a song. As you know, I'm a singer myself.
Yes.
And I had actually sung at conferences and I'd spoken at conferences, but I hadn't seen what was right in front of me, combining the two yet. So you actually inspired me to give 2 talks this past year where I also sang. So thank you.
That's amazing. Oh, I'm so glad. It makes me so happy. Thank you. Yeah, that's amazing. It's honestly a great way to, connect, right? I mean, music is such a powerful tool, because it knows no barriers, right? I mean, I'm a South Indian. I'm trained in Indian classical, but I do all sorts of mashup. I take like an Adele song, I take like an Ed Sheeran song, and then I mash it up with, a typical Indian classical song, and then I try singing in Spanish. Like I try all sorts of things. I think music is like such a happy place for me, and I think it is for you too. Like I've heard you sing, I've listened to some of your music, and you have a great voice.
Oh, thank you. I just remember, listening to you. I think you sang Jasmine's song from the new Aladdin.
Yes.
And I felt a smile appear on my face, and I looked around and I saw smiles on other faces, it's such a gift. And I want to ask, how do you feel when you're singing, when you're starting out your talks with a song? And is the feeling different between the singing and the speaking?
For me, not so much, honestly, because I think what I'm trying to do in both these modalities is still connect with the audience, right? Like the goal is the same. I just want to connect with you, the audience, whether it's 10 people or 10,000 people. And I would love for you to listen to what I have to say, and hopefully you find meaning in what I'm sharing, right? And to be honest, Jessica, after every talk, I receive like tons of messages, and at least almost half of them touch on the song. They're like, that's a great way to, start the song. And I remember the talk because of the song that you chose that day.
Yes.
Right? And for me, especially if it is an in-person talk, music helps me calm myself, center myself.
Mm-hmm.
It helps me reduce my heart rate and, just tell myself that, okay, I've got this.
यूं ही बरस बरस खाली घटा बरसे हम यार भीग जाए इस चाहत की बारिश में कुलु कुलु பொய்கள் சொல்லி என்னை வெல்வாய் அது தெரிந்தும் கூட அன்பே மனம் அதையே தான் எதிர்பார்க்கும் ఎన్నటికీ మాయదుగా చిగురాకు తొడిగే బంధం శిల సమయం విளையாட்டாய் உன்னால் भर ले अपनी बाहों में नान्निसपदुम श्वासपदुम उन्दयवाय नाले இங்குகிறேன் உன் நினைவால் நானேனா.
That's Vidya Srinivasan singing an evergreen romantic song, one of the first songs that she ever performed on stage back in middle school. She sings it in 3 different languages. Let's take a short break here to reflect on this question. What's a memorable speech or talk that you've heard, and what made it so memorable? Outside of hosting this podcast, I partner with leaders in the workplace to turn professional challenges into leadership successes and career progression. I love working with executive leaders, aspiring C-suite professionals, and of course, ampersands. If any of this sounds interesting to you, reach out to me at jessicawan.com. That's JESSICAWAN.com. Now, back to the show. Well, you mentioned that your first talk was at the Grace Hopper conference, and you actually ended up leading this conference from 2019 to 2021. You were the general chair, and this is the largest conference in the world for women in computing. Under your leadership, you grew the conference to 25,000 attendees. No small feat, and especially during COVID.
Pandemic, yeah.
What did this, right? What did this work mean for you personally?
I am a minority in tech. It's no doubt at all. So I started getting involved with the Grace Hopper conference primarily because that's where I started speaking. But I also wanted to understand what happens behind the scenes. I'm generally a very curious person. That's the exact reason I work in trust and safety at Meta as well now. Because I'm very curious on what happens behind the scenes. And so I just started, volunteering. And the first volunteering meeting that I went to, they were like, we want someone to take notes. And I was like, I'll do it. I didn't have a blog, nothing, but I'm like, I can create one. How hard can that be? So what I did the first year was just went to a couple of sessions that I was assigned to, and I took notes of what happened in that session. Right. And then the next year I was like, can I do something else? And they were like, yeah, we need help with X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. I literally learned what happens and how do people run this conference, because Grace Hopper is completely run by volunteers. There's a very, very small team at anitaB.org that actually helps with, connecting all the pieces, but it's predominantly a conference run by volunteers. So, I started sharing different tracks, like the open source day, the human computer interaction, which is where I have a background in, the career track, the VR track. So I shared a whole bunch of tracks, and the leaders at anitaB.org, felt in 2019, they were like, hey, we would love for you to be the general chair of the conference. And I wanted to be a general chair. Like when I started out, I'm also a very ambitious person. I was like, I want to start like this, but someday I want to be on the big stage. I want to chair the entire conference. I had this in the back of my head, but in my mind, that was much farther than when it originally happened. And, as life has it, the year that they invited me to be the general chair, I found out I was pregnant with my second just a few weeks ago.
Wow.
So, the timeline in my mind was, people usually ask to take it easy and, during your pregnancy. And I also had a toddler with me, back then. So I had a toddler, I was pregnant, I was, working on virtual reality at Microsoft, which was a very new area. So work was pretty intense. And then here I was, debating about taking on yet another almost full-time job. I asked my husband, because at the end of the day, he's the one who's going to be directly impacted by this decision of mine. So he was like, yeah, you always want to do it. So why are you even second guessing yourself now? Right? Of course you can do it. So for me, it came down to this is something that I've always wanted to do, but the greater purpose was helping women. This is a conference for women. It's a conference for, bringing equality into the tech space. There's so many issues. I can spend an hour just talking about all the issues women face in the workspace, starting from finding the right opportunities to helping stay. So for me, this is a way of me giving back to the community and empowering minorities in tech, right? So, and I did it 2019, and that was the year where I got on stage. I have a very fun story that I'll say for some other day about how my breast pump stopped working the night before the keynote. I literally went to Walmart 20 miles from where I was staying in Orlando because my breast pump broke down at 12 a.m. in the night. So I went to find a breast pump and I did not sleep that night because I was trying to find how do I sanitize this thing.
Oh my goodness.
This is the reality of a working mom. And the next day morning, I had to get on stage for the keynote in front of 25,000 people. And I almost, I was so exhausted after the keynote, but the energy in the room was amazing. I was like, nothing mattered at that point, like sleepless night or all these struggles, and nothing mattered. It was all about, this is why I want to do it. Right. So, and I think then that energy, I think, still keeps me going. When I go and give a talk, it's the energy that I derive from the audience. I go and I speak at a lot of universities as well. Students and, the type of questions they ask, the inquisitiveness that I see in them, it's that energy that kind of helps me, keep going. I see how hard the market is right now. I see how many people are struggling in various facets, not just, when it comes to finding a job, but in a lot of things. Like a lot of people don't have the support to raise kids. A lot of people don't have the financial freedom to do what they want. Like I definitely am fortunate, and I want to caveat what I'm saying with this first. For me, success is, I think, for at least the next couple of years, it is about finding that balance. Because I do sometimes get into the tendency of going all into one.
Yeah.
That the 22 patents that you said before, most of those were filed over a span of 3 years because I was obsessed with it.
I see.
Right? So I do have a tendency where I definitely go all in and, almost brush with burnout and then have to find myself and come back. I think I have recognized what that feels like now. So I'm a lot more cautious. And that is exactly why I invest a lot in my health and fitness, because I need that equilibrium. A great analogy that I heard from one of the leaders at Microsoft when I was probably like an year into my career was, and that stayed with me for these many years. She always said, you're a juggler, but you're holding glass balls.
Yes.
And you can only hold 2 at a time. You can keep juggling, but you have to be very careful of, which ones you're holding at any given point of time. And also when you add that to the notion of glass balls versus rubber balls, some of these, it'll bounce back. It's okay to give it, a 6-month break or like a 9-month break, because it's going to bounce back. It's in you. Like, it's no longer the thing that you are doing. You're the person. Like, you can bounce back, right? But there are some things which are glass balls and you just can't afford to drop it, right? For me, so I have to be very cognizant of what are the 2 things. And I actually evaluate this on a monthly, basis, I would say. For this month, what is important? Because my kids are so young that they need mom and dad for most things. And, that means like there are some months which are crazy. My kids are also into music. And May and June, collectively, they had 6 different recitals. Right? That means, me and my husband, we have to be there, take them for practice sessions, help them practice at home, take them for recitals, figure out the outfit, like this and that. It's like a gazillion logistics, right? Those months, that was the glass wall for me.
Yeah.
right? Compared to summer where, you can go a little bit more easier until school starts and pick up something else. Like, I think as anybody who wants to have a multidimensional, multifaceted career, you have to be so cognizant of what are the two balls you want to hold this, for the next, month or quarter or year or whatever is it. And same thing with at work too. This year is very critical for me because I'm working on elections and 2024 is the year of elections. Across the world, half the world is going to the polls this year, right? And I take my job very, very seriously. I think it's, again, a place of privilege that I get to work on something as critical as protecting the democracy of the countries. I take that very, very seriously, very, very responsibly. And it's a very high risk, high reward job. There's only a handful of people who have access to the type of data that I do at Meta. So I have to make sure that I am, my brain is free to go and do the type of thinking that the job demands. And that means this year, the focus was on the job.
Yeah.
So I actually, turned away a lot of speaking, opportunities this year because I just, I needed to clear my head so that I can go focus. Like 12 to 13 elections this year meant every month, on average, there was an election. So I had to be present for my team. I had to be present to do the right thing in my job. That means I had to say no to something else because the family was never an option to give up. My health and fitness was never an option to give up. So it's only 24 hours. So it's these type of, deliberations that I have to have with myself. And for me, I think going back to your question of what does success mean? It is finding this type of balance. And more importantly, Jessica, being comfortable with the decision that I take for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people also feel very guilty. Because when you make a choice to focus on these two things, you should not let guilt interfere on the third thing that you intentionally parked for the next foreseeable future. And call it the era where we live in, where we are constantly bombarded with way too much data than we need to, or societal expectations. People get sucked into that. Right? So for me, I want to make sure that I am comfortable, I am kind to myself with the decisions that I take.
Oh, this is so important. And I think you're already kind of answering my next question. But the point of this podcast is to really co-create together an Ampersand manifesto, principles for leading a multi-passionate life. I think what you have been talking about in terms of not just deciding, which of the rubber balls to drop at this time, but also feeling good about that and confident about that. I think this is so important. What else is coming up in terms of the manifesto and advice that you want to give for people who are thinking of pursuing an Ampersand life?
I would say do it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do it for others. Don't do it because some influencer is doing it. Because I actually see a lot of people gravitate towards picking up something just because they saw someone else do it and found that life to be jazzy. Like, do you find joy in the thing that you're doing? Right? Are you able to connect with the activity? Could be anything, but are you able to connect? Are you able to get into that flow state?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel good after doing it, or does it feel like a chore? Right? It's very easy to get influenced by the plethora of data. And I see the irony over here working for, a big tech company here. But I think internet in general, right? There's just so many avenues by which everyone is trying to influence us. From the ads that come into your, email, to the person's video that pops up on your social media, to the advertisements that you see when you're watching. Everybody's trying to influence you into something.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it all looks good on paper. Mm-hmm. But if you really want to pursue an Ampersand, life, you have to figure out the things that, are at the intersection of what you love doing, what you are able to build the skills to do well, and what gives you satisfaction in a way that you are able to sustain it for the longer term.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you have to try it. I think, when I started running after a very long break, the best advice that I got from, one of the folks in my network was, don't post anything anywhere. Just do it for yourself.
Yeah.
Just do it for yourself. See if you like it. I was like, accountability and this and that. They're like, no, you don't need an external accountability factor. Once you love doing it, you will be self-accountable. So I think that's the advice that I would give. Do it for yourself, not for others, because once you get to the point where you're truly doing it, the energy comes from within, you will actually serve a lot more people because you're authentic in what you're doing. You're honest in what you're doing, and you've put in the effort, and you've not taken any shortcuts. You've put in the effort. So you're able to actually, be good. The output is pretty much, it's high quality, and that will help others, in fact.
Vidya, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. Folks, you can learn more about Vidya at her website, vidyasrinivasan.info, and we'll link to this in the show notes.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessica.
If you liked this show, hit like, subscribe, and share with your friends and fellow Ampersands. And if you're enjoying our show, please consider leaving a rating or a short review so that more people can find out about the show. I had a chance to listen back on my interview with Vidya, and I wanted to share a few key takeaways. 1. It's remarkable how Vidya's speaking career grew from a little seed that she planted, a Google search of how to build confidence. There's something to be said about facing your developmental opportunities head on and having the thing that you need to work on become eventually the thing that you're known for. 2. I really appreciated the honesty and transparency with which Vidya shared her experience being pregnant while chairing the conference, having her breast pump give out, getting no sleep, and also being completely revitalized by a community of women in tech. I remember being pregnant while also leading a team at a startup, and people assume all sorts of things about you. How you might feel about work after having a child, your commitment level, what might energize or drain you. But at the end of the day, it is a highly personal experience and yours alone to have. And the more we share these real stories, not the assumptions, the better for everyone. 3. Vidya referenced the juggling glass and rubber balls speech, and I wanted to share more context around it. This originally came from a commencement speech given by Brian Dyson, former CEO of Coca-Cola, in 1991. He referred to work as a rubber ball, and family, friends, health, and spirit as glass balls. If you drop the rubber ball of work, it'll bounce back. But if the other 4 balls fall, they could be damaged or shatter. I really appreciated this reapplication of the analogy, as it's a way I look at my own life, and it's such a helpful visualization for any leader to keep in mind and return to.
There's going to be a few things where you're good at. There's going to be other things where you're not going to be good at, but you'll never know that until you try it.